Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Dissecting Fiction podcast. My name is Vinny Murphy.
I'm Christian Cutlick.
And we're going to do something different on the next couple of episodes. For those of you who have been with us since the beginning, you know that we launched at Halloween. We enjoy Halloween thoroughly. So we're going to do a series of special podcasts about our favorite films from different horror genres.
Yeah, this week we're doing zombie films, and next week we still haven't quite decided, but...
Yeah, we got a couple of ideas. We're going to end with our favorite Halloween film, a film we feel like encompasses our favorite aspects of the season.
We're doing zombie films, our favorite zombie films ever, basically.
Which is funny, I think we kind of both landed in a similar area with zombie films, which it might be telling about the subgenre. Christian, why don't you start? What's your favorite zombie film?
I have to kind of go with 28 Days Later. I said Shaun of the Dead, but the more I thought about it, I was kind of like, what was a horror movie that actually really scared me? Because Shaun of the Dead, it's like a comedy, and I think Hot Fuzz is a lot better than Shaun of the Dead, but that's a different thing. But when I was thinking about it, 28 Days gave me nightmares for a couple months as a kid, and that was kind of my first zombie film, and it also was a big impact on horror movies in general too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now that you did change your pick, we did not land in anywhere remotely similar.
Oh.
But that's okay. People can see how, live and raw this podcast really is. I would agree with that. I think 28 Days Later might be responsible for bringing zombies back,
especially
into
in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, it definitely went from being something that was, talked about in horror circles to being pop culture. Danny Boyle, up to that point, probably still best known for Trainspotting, really took this incredibly, as you just said, raw view of what something like this would look like.
Yeah, he also changed the idea of a zombie a lot. I mean, it hasn't really stuck around as much as people would have thought it has, because he made, the zombies are running around. They actually they weren't crawling. They ran at you.
Well, yeah, and I don't think at any point they're really referred to as zombies. They're the infected.
Yeah.
Which, plays off of that Romero idea that zombies are coming from something scientific, as opposed to your original, voodoo zombies, which would have been the impression up until about Romero. It's really just expanding on what he established. I think it's funny because a lot of people are always like, oh, you want fast zombies or slow zombies? And people are like, oh, I want the slow Romero zombies. When in a lot of ways, 28 Days Later is very similar to a Romero film.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's especially with how, bottled it becomes later on in the movie. Because at first it's they're in a big open city and they're running away. And then eventually they get trapped on, the military base. And they're talking about, it's very Walking Dead in that scenario at that point, where they're just, stuck there trying to get out of this weird military camp.
So, the more I think about it, while there is a lot of Romero in it, it's not as Romero-esque for one big reason, and that's the zombie apocalypse in this film isn't sustainable.
Even though they're fast zombies, they're still zombies, and that they're not very intelligent. If you just build a big enough wall, they won't be able to get in. And that's kind of how people just wait out the apocalypse, basically. And that's something Romero never did, because Romero always made it a human condition, zombies would always exist because of humanity.
Yeah, and at a certain point, in his films, zombies grow more intelligent. It's in Day of the Dead. It's probably most played up in Land of the Dead, because that really becomes the plot, is there's almost a zombie society.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, it's formed, which is the opposite of what happens in 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later is there are humans, and then they kind of go crazy because there's this virus, and then they wipe themselves out because they're starving.
Yeah, it doesn't make it a sustained thing, but it's also big in the other aspect about 28 Days Later is that it was actually a really scary movie to me. I feel a lot of zombie films have become less scary.
Yeah, there's always this sort of push and pull with zombie movies where they're definitely monster movies. They're definitely almost never played as like a serious threat, or like I shouldn't say serious. I should say like a realistic threat. 28 Days Later does try to play it as a very realistic threat. And I think that changes it sort of intrinsically. Like you're immediately playing with different rules because you're not seeing them so much as monsters as the result of human meddling.
It's kind of built upon that what Walking Dead would do later on, in that it's more about how would somebody survive in the apocalypse more than anything else. But the zombies themselves were scary because you just see them like barrel down a dark hallway. And in my bedroom, there was like a hallway next to it. So whenever I'd go to sleep, like I just imagine like one of the zombies barreling down there.
Yeah, I'm picturing that. The funny part about that is, like that's another thing where our age difference plays in. Where like when I saw that, I probably wasn't too scared of things in my house.
No, but I was like,
you were
9.
pretty young, yeah.
But let's go to your favorite zombie movie now.
So my favorite zombie movie is almost the opposite of what you picked. And in truth, if I were using kind of the standards that you laid out as why you picked 28 Days Later, I would have picked Dawn of the Dead. But I didn't. I went like visceral, the thing that I look forward to watching the most out of zombie films when Halloween comes up, and that's Return of the Living Dead.
The classic.
The classic Return of the Living Dead. If you do not know, Return of the Living Dead is a sequel to Night of the Living Dead because Night of the Living Dead is public domain. And in theory, pretty much anyone could pick up from that concept. My understanding is it actually was based off of some ideas from John Russo, who co-wrote Night of the Living Dead with George Romero. But Dan O'Bannon, who came in to finish the script, was very much against doing a straight sequel to Night of the Living Dead because he felt like Dawn of the Dead was the greatest movie he could possibly make as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And so he went the other way. He went completely ridiculous.
It's interesting because it's like those first two movies are very contained, and this one is much more like the whole world's in chaos.
And it also makes zombies very goofy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, which works. And I think it works maybe that once. If you've ever seen the sequels to Return of the Living Dead, they're not like abysmal. Like, they're not bad. And the first sequel, especially the beginning, is really, really funny. But it's a hard thing to replicate because it's so genuine. Like, it's just genuinely trying to take this concept and make sure that this isn't serious.
It's that very, like, 80s way of filming things, and that, like, characters in the film themselves take this threat very seriously, but the threat is kind of goofy, and it's in, like, a goofy setting.
Yeah, and it's, it's playing off of, like, the fear of, like, the punk movement in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where you have, like, these goofball punks who... There's also, like, a new wave kid in there, which I always thought was really funny. It's all these over-the-top performances from really good character actors. And the whole thing ends where they have to nuke the city just to get rid of everything. And you eventually find out that's how they spread the zombie. Yeah. But it's just... It's like an hour and a half. There is no pressure on anything. And it's great because when it's over, it's over. You weren't supposed to learn anything. And that, like, the biggest action sequence in the entire film is, like, a naked punk rock girl dancing on graves.
I mean, like, this is, even though it's, like, goes a bit more into, like, the action route and more, like, the horror comedy route, this, like Dead Rising, Resident Evil, like basically every horror movie after this takes like a lot from this movie. Yeah, I mean, this popularized the idea of zombies eating brains specifically. Yeah. And that's what they were driven by. Like anytime you hear anyone like going brains, that's from Return of the Living Dead. It's the Tar Man. It's iconic in ways that most people don't even recognize. Because it's just so much part of the zeitgeist at this point. Right. It's so tied in to what zombie films were perceived to be after it that it almost disappears. Yeah. It's kind of like Doc Savage and The Shadow with superheroes, where they're so integral to like the creation of the genre that most people who are interested in it don't even know they exist. Yeah, like the roots just go that deep. Like this is where a lot of the roots were laid out. I think another aspect of the movie that it has to be mentioned, is the soundtrack. Yeah. It's a movie, pure 80s. And it's a movie about punk rockers that actually has punk bands in it, which you don't see. You don't see in the sequel.
if you look at the sequel soundtrack, it's almost like they were like, oh, this worked last time. Let's hand this off to a label and see what they have that's like really hip and cool.
No,
And it doesn't work because it's just genuine. You got TSOL on there.
It doesn't have that like raw energy to it where it's just kind of like, oh, I don't give a shit, whatever. You know?
Right, because it's not real. And then there's a couple of songs they threw in that were written for the movie that fit with it perfectly. It's just, I don't think there has ever been a comedy that has been more perfectly packaged than Return of the Living Dead. It's kind of what Gunn was going for with Guardians of the Galaxy, but I think this is even more successful because it's even more raw. It's even more genuine.
Yeah, I mean, that's something like only the 80s could kind of produce as well, in that like directors actually had full control over the movies. And the other aspect I liked about it is that it's still kind of scary. It's like, yeah, it's mainly comedy, but like it's really gory.
Yeah, it reminds you of what's going on because they are, taking a lot from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Like aesthetically. But then you also get turned around where we say that, and then there's also like zombies that are half of bodies. There's zombies,
the intestines and everything.
Yeah, there's like animatronics that you never would have seen in a Romero film.
Yeah.
Though Day of the Dead actually is super effects heavy. Just in a different way, like more realistic, if you will. More realistic, that's fair. But yeah, I couldn't put any zombie film really above Return of the Living Dead as if we're going straight up favorite, because that's what I look forward to watching the most.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. That's a totally valid pick. I mean, there's no way anyone can really argue against it besides being like, if they're a pretentious douche and they're like, oh, this movie, everyone picks this movie.
Yeah, but it's.
But how could you not?
Also, you have
to.
You have like near main characters that are named Bert and Ernie, also, which is phenomenal. It's just, there's nothing that I look forward to more than Return of the Living Dead. And I've almost gone to see 45 Grave just to watch them play Party Time a few times. But one time they're supposed to come to NJ Pack, they canceled the whole thing.
NJ Pack, really? That's a weird venue.
Yeah, there was going to be them and like, oh boy, another like horror themed punk band.
But the NJ Pack, you can't even mosh there.
I mean, everyone's old that's listening to 45 Grave, I think. They're not interested. But I think that, those are our two favorite zombie movies. We're going to cover some other genres. I'm not going to reveal those quite yet. We're thinking one might be the one with the big bloody knives and the guys walking slowly. But thank you for joining us on this very special edition of the Dissecting Fiction podcast. As you well know, we are all over social media. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Vero, Twitter. You can find us usually just by typing in Dissecting Fiction.
Into your favorite social media.
Yeah, I mean, if your favorite social media is like, I was about to say like LiveJournal. We should just start.
LiveJournal's dead.
Is it gone? We can't even access it anymore? I have like 3 accounts on there.
Oh,
because it got too much drama. When there was too much drama on one account, you took a break and you started a new account. Yeah. It's like a fresh life. This is all within like a year, like junior year of high school.
No, people did that with MySpace pages.
Oh man, MySpace. We're not on MySpace. No. I think MySpace still does exist.
It does.
But anyway, the actual social medias that you use except for Snapchat. But as important, please hit that little bell if you're on YouTube. Follow us. That'll give you the alerts when you get new episodes, which is important because they're going to be so rapid this month.
Yeah, we're hopefully going to do at least 4 or 5.
Please follow us, which a bunch of you have recently, I've noticed. We had a nice little uptick in follows.
I noticed that on Facebook.
And like the video, because we got to bust up these YouTube algorithms and get ourselves on some front pages that we aren't on right now. But we will be back later this month with more for you, and thanks for listening.
Spooky, scary.
Spooky, scary time.